Right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's class. Today we're going to talk about risk management. So in today's class, to begin with, we will introduce a little bit about what the risk management is about. We introduce four types of risk management, and we'll also talk about risk management process, which also is including four steps. And then we mention a little bit about the crisis management. And what is a risk? Right? We say risks are those events. They present the potential for damages to the business strategies, to those who compose uncertainties implicit in the execution of that strategy, and to those that must be embraced in order to achieve the goals of the organizations. So for those risks is actually a part of every human's endeavors, right? From the moment we get up in the morning, we drive, take the public transportation to the school or to work until we get back into our bed. Um, Everyone is exposed to the risk of the different levels and different degrees. So it's the same to the organization. From the first day that we set up, the organization is exposed to all different types of the risk. Some employees might disclose some very confidential information to other rivalries. Or maybe organizations are facing some financial difficulties, right? So those are all the risks that we have to consider and think about how we're able to prevent and sometimes is address. Right? Risk management is to assess these risks, not only to be avoided, but also embrace in the service of achieving the goal of the organization. We have four types of the risk. We have facility equipment related risk, personal risk, contract related risk, and external risk. So facility and equipment risk, right? They're dealing with the physical aspect of the organizations. We normally use one sense, like your sight, your hearing, your touch, and smell to examine it. So you can help you assess the conditions, layout, safety of the facility, and the equipment, right? So when we're doing the facilities risk assessments, we always think about those questions like, is the light adequate enough? How about the facility temperature? Right. Hopefully during the winter it's not too cold, and during the summer it's not too hot, which might cause some potential illness to the employees. Right. How about spacing? So when people walk around, is anything that will prevent them to access the facilities? We're also going to look at the conditions of the operational equipments, look at the locker room and restrooms, right? So those are the facility and equipment related risks, which is really easy for us to understand. Second type of risk related to the personal risk. The nature of the business involves dealing with and training people internally, so then they can produce externally. Some of the obstacle manager are facing nowadays is they have to deal with the peoples. So in the ideal world, all the men and women will work in environments of the collaborations and cohesive. The personal and professional conflict should not be existing. Unfortunately, the real world that we are having right now is far from being perfect. We have to learn how we are able to work with each other with different work ethics and coming from really different backgrounds. So there are four examples that I'm showing for use here. Right, the first example is in the sports world. So whether we have fair hiring procedures. When we talk about human resource management, we talk about we have equal opportunities provided to every individuals coming from really different, diverse backgrounds, right? So the fair hiring policies is basically we're asking, do we actually treat all the qualified applicants really equally? Have you ever discriminated some of the candidates? Do we have a internal candidate that have too much advantage during the entire recruiting process? Having a fair hiring policies is actually pretty important, right? To make sure everyone to be treated equally, not just male but also females, right? They're giving a lot more opportunities in the job placement, right? So that's one example. Second example is about discriminations at work, right? So the example is like when you try to promote employees, whether everyone has been considered equally, right? So are you promoting a person based on the person's qualifications and skills and experience, or based on your personal favorites, right? So that's about discrimination at work. And third one is about equal pay for equal work, right? So whether these kind of questions are about like whether people's in the same positions actually get the same pay, right? So this is example. Particularly a lot of discussion about in sports industries is like female really feel it's not getting the same pay as a male athletes, right? So that's why we have seen the U.S. women's soccer team after they're winning the World Cups, they sued the U.S. Soccer federations for not providing the equal price monies or salaries to the females women's soccer teams. All right, so this is also another big questions. But in the sports, we say tennis possibly is the only sport that male and females possibly will pay very equally, right? You find out if you go and watch Australian Open, U.S. Opens, those four major Grand Slam events. So the female single players actually got the same prize monies as the male single players, right? So this is the trend right now, and we try to provide an equal play for the equal work. And sexual harassment is also very common at workplace. It's something we try to prevent, which also associate with the personal risk, right? We're using one example that happened recently. I think all of you have noticed about this. Like Daryl Morey, who is a GM from NBA Houston Rockets. So he sent out a tweet about supporting the independence of Hong Kong. Although he deleted this tweet in a few hours, but the negative impact associated with his tweet has already been caused. 5 or 6 Chinese sponsors decided to suspend the partnerships with the Houston Rockets, and also this entire season's all Rockets games has not been broadcasted on Chinese televisions and live streaming platforms. Right. So from this case, this is related to the professional sports organization when we try to expand ourselves internationally, try to promote or market ourselves internationally, and what kind of rule that we will have to follow. Maybe one people's little mistake can damages the entire effort that has been made by the entire generations. So this is actually a big lesson to learn from the NBA. And not just NBA, but also other professional sports organizations when we decided to expand our products internationally, try to take advantage of the globalizations, how we're able to handle these things, how we'll be able to minimize this risk, right? So this is about personal risk. Contract-related risk. As an organization, we have to set a contract all the time, right? The contract is a legal agreement between two or more parties who agree to perform or to refrain from performing same act now or in the future. So there are a lot of contracts that organization will have to sign. For instance, when we purchasing service and programs. So if we would like to order 100 computers, so we have to sign a contract because this is a big purchase. Right. If we would like to run the facilities, we have to sign a contract. So if team have to travel, so when team have to travel, stay in the hotel for like a month, so we have to sign a contract with the hotel. Hotel want to you pay up front. 85% of the money have to pay up front, right? So could hotel want to prevent those risks for having the empty rooms. For all organizations, we also have to sign employment contracts, and also if a sports agent, you also have to sign the endorsement contract for your athletes. When you're signing the endorsement contract for your athletes, for your clients, you have to read those details very carefully. So I'll give you one of the example that I'm currently dealing with. Is I'm helping Cristiano Ronaldo's negotiating a contract with one dairy companies. So basically, the proposal sent from the dairy company is say they want to use Cristiano Ronaldo's image on their advertising for 6 months. So this image will only be used on the outdoor advertising and the online advertising. So this is the basic content for their proposal. So if you're currently Cristiano Ronaldo's agents, so you possibly want to know more about it from this proposal. So what information would you need to include in your contract? Think about it. This is the requirement from the clients. What would be the other information you would need from the dairy company? So possibly you have to think about those things. The first thing, you say you want to use Cristiano Ronaldo's image for about 6 months. So when will be starting day? Which 6 months? Is this 6 months for this year or next year, right? So the second thing you have to talk a little bit more about, think more about, the slope of the promotions. Which markets do you want to use Cristiano Ronaldo's image for the promotions? Is it one market, multiple market, or the global market? Because different markets, the price will be very different, right? Second things. Third thing, you have to review all these promotional materials before their alpha promotion, right? You ask for, say, hey, I can provide you the image, but you have to send me all this material, promotional material you're planning to promote by using Cristiano Ronaldo's image, right? And also here they're talking about I'm using Cristiano Ronaldo's image for the outdoor advertising and online advertising. Can you provide more definitions about outdoor advertising? Which media platform, which media outlet would you like to use for delivering these contents, right? So, and that's the next things. So in the contract, you also have to include a section about the product itself. Make sure the product is really, really healthy, has a very positive image, because any of the potential scandal associated with the product and the brand, they will also potentially hurt the image of Cristiano Ronaldo's brand, right? So those are things you will have to go and think about it when you're writing a contract, right? When you're writing this contract, so you have to make sure you're not going to get involved with a lot of potential risk, right? And one last thing you possibly want to include in the contract is about payments. So when do you want to pay, and how much, what approach, right? So this is about contract-related risks. And for the external risks, are those environmental elements outside of your control. So you have to proactively adapt the programs to the environmental elements that affect the business, but out of your manager's controls. So a lot of time we're having an insurance that can really protect the programs and facilities. It's a common, like the event got controlled due to the bad weathers. So how you be able to compensate those stakeholders who has been impacted by the cancels of these events, right? So you have to go and think about it. The second part of today's class, we're going to talk about risk management process. We talk about we have 4 different types of risks. Right, we have a personal risk, we have facility equipment risk, we have a contract-related risk, and we also have an external risk. The second part, we're going to look at the risk management process, how we are able to manage the risk. So in terms of the risk management process, so we have 4 different steps that we have to follow. Right, first one is identify the risk. Second one, we have to analyze the risk. We have to evaluate this risk, and also we have to go and think about the approach that we can manage the risk, which is also called risk treatments. In terms of the risk identification, so we have to look at the threats and hazards. So we are going to look at these 4 different types of the risk that we just mentioned previously. right? We classify them into 4 different types of risks, and we look at those things. They may prevent you from being successfully operating your business, right? So for instance, if we're going to hosting the events, what type of race do you think food poisoning belongs to? Do you think that will be a personal race? Do you think that is external race? So food poisoning, it depends, right? If you provide your own food during the event, this may be related to personal race, right? But if you are asking a third party to provide the food, this may be related to external race, right? So this is about risk identification, which is the first step. Second step is about risk analysis, right? Identify those risks are classified into 2 basic areas. First one is how often will these risks occurring, right? It's very occasionally, frequently. That's, and also we have talked about certainty of the risk. If that happens, how serious the outcomes will becomes, right? So you have to go and think about this. It's called second step risk analysis. I will give you an example here. I'll give you about 5 seconds to look at these pictures. Okay, we have identified this risk is the entry to the truck from the lower levels is directly onto the ranking and walking track with a limit visions and no warning sign. So someone entering here may walk into a runner or walkers and injure one or both parties. So this is a race. So I want to go and think about what category of this race belongs to. Is a facility, personal, external, or contract related? Is facility, right? This is the design of facility, the issue of facilities. So how often will this risk will occur? Could be very frequently, it depends on how often this facility is being used. If that happened, how serious would this be? Could also be very serious, right? So what would be the method for us to use to prevent that from happening? Maybe we can have a little warming sign here, right? When people work in this area and they are able to identify this warming sign, and they will slow down their paces, maybe they can prevent this from happening, right? So this is an example about risk analysis. Step 3 is about risk evaluation. So after we classify the risk into different categories, we look at how serious the outcome could be and how often this is from happening. So we're based on this information, we're going to review this risk matrix, indicate whether or not the risk is acceptable. So for those serious risks, and also might happen very often, so we're going to deal with that first. For those risks, it's not that serious and also not going to happen very often, so we're going to deal with that later. For those risks with less risk and not likely to happen, right? So this we'll classify them and we'll deal with that later, right? Deal with that at last. So step 4 is we have to go and develop a treatments for managing the risk. We have 4 treatments we can use: retention, reduce the risk, avoid the risk, and transfer the risk. How can we retain the risk? So the first methods we can use is risk retention. So some of the risks, they are not very serious. So a lot of time organizations will retain them, meaning we're not going to have any action to deal with that, to alleviate that risk. But the most common, what we try to do as an organization is we try to reduce the risk, right? How can we reduce the risk? Then we normally will establish a series of control that including supervision and staff trainings for reducing those potential risks. For those including remaking the facility updates, maybe you provide some proper training to the employee and teach them how to deal with that situation if that happens. We also may change the rule and regulations. This is very common in the sports industries, right? Particularly after September 11th and also after Boston Marathon in 2013. So all the security check at sports event are very, very tight nowadays. If you're going to watch MFL games, for instance, so they had introduced a lot of new policies, right? One of the policies called clear bag policy. So when all the bag that you bring to the facilities, that you need to look like this, completely transparent and these shades, right? So all those things, the goal is they try to reduce the risk, right? Even they won't allow you to bring in like waters, will not you to bring in like umbrellas, will not you to bring in a lot of big backpacks, right? So those strategy is necessary, right? The goal is try to reduce the risk. We introduce some of these policies here. And the third times a risk is we're treating the risk or managing the risk. It's called avoidance. So we discontinue with these components of activities considered as a risk. So typically used when the risk is very high and also it's pretty easy for you to eliminate it. So one of the examples I remember when I was watching the Women's World Cups in 2019. So that's a game between Sweden and Chile. So the game itself was a very, very, very intensive. So when the game was close to 70 minutes, so you know a soccer game lasts for 90 minutes, right? So there were some lightning and thunderstorms in the sky. So the referee decided to suspend the game. It was a pretty smart decision because they prevent athletes from getting injuries because of this inclement weather, then also protect the audience who were there watching the game as well, right? So this is called avoidance, right? Last but not the least is transfer the risk, right? We identify the risk and then we transfer it to the organizations not financially responsible for that. Sometimes the risk is just hard for us to prevent that from happenings, right? So then we have to deal with that. So we're using those three methods, then we are able to transfer the risk. The first one is we're using waiver. We're citing a waiver is intentional and voluntary giving up the right, either by express statements or by conduct. Think about it when you're using fitness centers here. They all have to ask you to sign the waivers, right? Because you're using all the equipment by yourself. If you got injured, you will be fully responsible for this, right? Fitness center is not going to be responsible for any of the injury you might occur, like when you're doing your own exercise, right? So this is about waivers are also pretty common there. Second one is about insurance policies. It's issued by the company. They agree to assume that financial risk of the unfortunate occurrence on behalf of the organizers in the return for a fee. So insurance company is also insurance policy is also a very important things. Like when we're having organizing events. So if we have to cancel the event due to the inclement weathers, we have to think about how we are able to compensate the loss, the financial loss associated with all the stakeholders. Like, so a lot of time we're buying insurance, and insurance company can help us to cover those loss. For all organization, right, we also are helping the employee to buy their life insurance and health insurance, right? Those is also we'll try to transfer this risk to a third party, which is insurance company. The last but not the least is about the independent contractors. Sometimes when we're working with an independent contractor, we also have to think about how we are able to deal with these issues as well.